I was involved in some pretty heavy combat operations in Southern Helmand Province. I lost brothers. I watched my friends die, watched my friends get hit, had IEDs go off in front of me, very close proximity to me. I fired my weapon anger. I killed people. I fought. I helped save civilians. I did all that. It was not easy. When I came back, I was definitely changed. I came back, I was just angry. I was distant. I didn't want to be around anyone. I would go out and I'd get drunk and I'd go out looking for bar fights. Anybody who was bigger than me, anybody that looked at me wrong. I would go out and I'd go out and I'd try and fight them. Whether I'd win or lose. That was my night every night. I was angry. I was not a good person. It definitely changed me. Losing my brothers was something that I could never describe.
I was wounded November 11th, 2004 in the Battle of Fallujah, Operation Phantom Fury. I was wounded by a sniper. My whole life changed on the tip of a bullet that day. I didn't think at 20 years old I would have to learn how to walk again and learn how to cope with life, the simple things in life. Here I am, broken infantryman. I'm a broken gun to the Marine Corps now, so I'm no use to them. I went overseas to protect and serve. And then I came back and I couldn't do it any longer. So I was filled with a lot of hatred, a lot of anger. But then I would also bottle up my thoughts, my emotions, so that I could once again protect my family from it. But I was actually in turn destroying the relationship, the love that was there. I was just filling it with a void. I would become distant. Wouldn't say anything. I would just stare off into space, stare blankly at the TV, and not realizing that I was doing it. I had 3 hours to go by and I hadn't said a word. I hadn't even moved. Just lost in my own mind. And because of my anger and my outbursts and my verbal abuse, a lot of people were just walking on eggshells around me. They were afraid. They were afraid of me. And kind of made me happy at the time, because the farther they were from me, the less I had to deal with them, and then the less that they were hurt. I thought I was helping them by pushing them away, not honestly realizing that I was destroying everything that I had built up, the love and the friendship that I had with friends and family.
I was with 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines, Kilo Company, 2nd Squad. I was in 04 to 08. My MOS was 0311. I deployed to Iraq 3 times between 05 and 08. We were the first squad in Kilo Company, and I believe in the battalion, to get into a firefight on that deployment. We were patrolling along Euphrates River, and we were watching guys running parallel with us, and we got to a point where we stopped, and as soon as we got set in along the bank facing across Euphrates, they mortared us, rocketed us, shot at us. I definitely remember it being the most exciting time in my life. Even up until now, nothing was ever exciting as that first firefight. I mean, also because no one really got hurt either, so, but I'll definitely never forget that feeling. I remember the machine gunner next to me throwing up, saying, "Oh, I was sick." I think he was just excited or scared, I don't know. People ask you, how was it over there? And there was more, just as much, if not more, boring times as it was exciting times. Like, I think I hit every high and low over there in my life. From the most depressing, the most exciting, the most boring are the 3 things that stick out in my mind. I got a couple dates, that I don't look forward to every year, and October 19th was one of them. I wasn't on the patrol, I was standing post, so I basically got to watch what happened. The squad is coming back. There's a main street, probably like a good solid half mile, 3/4 of a mile that I could see from the post. And they were crossing the street, and a car came out from the side. They didn't have hardly no time to react. I don't remember hearing that many shots at the car because it happened so quick, but the car blew up. One guy died, and I'd say at least the first half of the squad, everyone was injured. You know, I thank God I wasn't there, but I also don't appreciate watching it happen. One of those things, I guess you could say, you know, the stuff your nightmares are made of.
When we think about our veterans and service members returning from war, and when we think about the wounds of war, traditionally we think about physical injuries. We all recognize the disability or the impairment when a service member is missing an arm or a leg, or is blinded or has to use a wheelchair. But it's the invisible wounds of war that are least recognized, and it's these wounds that can be just as disabling, and in fact many times more disabling than the physical injuries. So let me start with post-traumatic stress. First, intrusive memories. These are the memories of war, of what they saw on the battlefield that come flooding back, unbidden, unwanted. Often they're called flashbacks. And I hear stories from veterans and service members about nighttime turning into a period of reliving the war, waking up in the middle of the night in the middle of a flashback, sometimes strangling or sometimes hitting their partner in the middle of a flashback, literally being back in the war. And this can turn nighttime into a dreaded time where they dread going to sleep because those memories will come flooding back. And sometimes the memories can be flooded by something as simple as a smell or a sound, and it brings it all back, and the soldier is literally reliving that time. The second is what we call hypervigilance. While they were deployed, they were always on a constant state of alertness because they were always in danger. But what happens when the brain can't turn off that alertness? That's what we call hypervigilance. So what we often see when they come home is not being able to shut down that alert system, literally always being on the lookout for danger, patrolling the yard at night like they did the perimeter on the battlefield, always sitting in a corner or against the wall when they go out to a restaurant, always being on the alert. And families often describe this as like living in a minefield, walking on eggshells at home because they never know what's going to raise that alertness. The third symptom of post-traumatic stress is what we call numbing. It's this emotional shutting down. So many of these veterans saw so much over there that one of the ways they have coped is by shutting down their emotions. But think about what this means in terms of living with your family. How do you have a relationship with your partner? How do you have a relationship with your children? And what often comes along with this shutting down and this emotional numbing is a loss of intimacy in relationships. When they've lost so much, it's dangerous to allow yourself to feel close to another person again. And then the fourth symptom that's characteristic of PTS is avoidance. And this again is a way of coping. What happens is very often the service member will shut himself up at home and avoid leaving the home because by avoiding going out, he avoids those triggers that may trigger the flashbacks, the hypervigilance, the memories. But as a result, many service members and veterans who are wounded are isolated at home, lose touch with friends, relatives, and literally become prisoners within their own homes.
When I got out, I lived at home with my family, but I come from a big family, so that was hard for me. You know, being around that many people, being in such close quarters, people getting normal family spats, you know, would set off my anger. And I chose to live in my truck a few times. Not long, you know, eventually either a friend who took me in or I'd go back with my family. And eventually I moved into my own house. I got a dog, which did help a lot, and it does tend to help out other veterans. It was one of those things that I needed my own space. I needed a quiet area that was mine, that I could go and hide in if I needed to. Someplace that I knew was safe, someplace that I was protected in, whether that be because I had, you know, my personal firearms there or just the fact that it was a quiet area that I could go and shut away the world.
After coming back, I got discharged in '08. I moved back home. I got an apartment. I had a decent amount of money saved up. I knew, I don't even know what I felt. I just knew it was different. It was peculiar. I knew I didn't want to deal with people. I holed up in that apartment. Mostly I'd have my family do shopping for me, but I'd go to the packaged goods store, get my beer, or whatever little bit of food and things I need for the apartment there. And I was most comfortable there. I didn't have to leave to hunt. I didn't have to leave to fish. I had my dog, who was my best friend. I really didn't see anything wrong with it. And sometimes I don't see anything wrong with it now because I like the solitude.
When 18 or 19-year-olds leave high school, they are developmentally at a point where they are trying on different roles. They are seeking a definition of self, but they are still in a very fluid developmental period of life. The military provides a prepackaged and very distinct identity for people who are at an age when everybody is seeking an identity. They live in that identity while they are in the service. And then when they come out of the service, they have lost the identity that they had in the service. They're seeking to re-enter and adopt, find, develop a civilian identity that can have some sense of continuity with the identity they had in the service. Our military system at this point discharges people without any preparation for re-entry into civilian life. And what people really need is help in acknowledging and having others acknowledge that they are in a transition. They have been handed an identity at a vulnerable age. They have usually adopted it very deeply, and they are now needing to develop a new identity in complex situations. And they need all the help they can get with that.
When I tried looking for employment opportunities, being the fact that I was a machine gunner, it doesn't translate real well to the civilian world. I would go on job interviews for things such as sporting goods stores and be like, well, what qualifies you for this job? And my best response is, well, I work well under pressure. I'm qualified with this machine gun, this rocket launcher, these explosives, this grenade, this handgun, this rifle, and they're telling me I'm overqualified for the job. There's not a whole lot infantry can do when they get out of the military. They have to pretty much shift their entire paradigm and become something totally different. They have to essentially almost forget everything that they did. And it's impossible. It really is. It took me almost a year and a half to find any kind of employment, and that ended up being a cashier at Sears. And even now, I'm having a hard time finding gainful employment. I work as a C-Tech, an automotive C-Tech. I do oil changes for $9.50 an hour, which I can barely live on.
The wounds of war do not only affect the service member and the veteran. The wounds of war affect everyone in the family. What we call secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, and those are conditions that affect the family. Brain injury, PTSD, the wounds of war, literally have ripple effects to everyone in the family.
I served 25 years as a military spouse of a Navy SEAL. I hate what war did to our veteran. And with the same hatred, I loathe what war did to the rest of us who love him. 9/11 happened 20 years into a military career for our family. Not only a military career, but a special operations military career. So at the 20-year mark, we had already survived everything that Uncle Sam could throw at us. Real world conflicts, combat in another region of the world. But when 9/11 happened, things began to change on our home front. I noticed it first in my veterans' sleep patterns. Later, I noticed it in mood swings. Rage showed its ugly head on our home front. There were times when we did not feel safe. and 24/7 we walked on eggshells. There were levels of self-medicating on the veteran's part, and also on family members' parts in trying to manage the emotional pain of what was unfolding on the home front. So the first question on my mind for the first several months after my veteran's return home, or in between his deployments, the first question on my mind was, what has happened to my veteran? But it didn't take too much time for me to ask a second question. And that second question was, what's happening to me? Because I started to see behaviors in my life, choices in my life, words coming out of my mouth that mirrored what my veteran was delivering on the home front. And I was finding that I could act and behave and speak in very similar ways. I too was having sleep problems. I too was having nightmares. I too was having headaches. My fuse was very short as well. I was making choices to self-medicate in ways that were self-destructive as well. And so I asked my veteran to go to counseling with me, and the answer was no. The veteran was not ready to do that. He didn't see that there was a problem. If I felt I had a problem, feel free to go to counseling, but he was not going to go. And so I wrestled with that for a short time, but then I did decide to go ahead and go to counseling in the town where we were living. And I looked for a counselor that had some experience with military families, but I was also looking for a counselor that had experience with combat stress. And when I got to her office, I remember asking her within a few minutes of being there, am I going crazy? Because I felt like I was losing it, that maybe I was going crazy. And she assured me that I was not going crazy, that I was living in an environment of prolonged stress, and that my reaction to that prolonged stress was a normal reaction. And my next question to her was, is PTSD contagious? And she said to me, I expected her to say no, but she said to me, yes, PTSD is contagious. That those who love and live with someone who has been traumatized, people who live with someone who has changed significantly can't help but change or be affected by that change in their loved one. And she also helped me to see that the different emotions I was experiencing, the different phases, the confusion, the anger, the rage, feeling guilty and not feeling like I should try harder, or being very, very tired and worn out, feeling like giving up, being very, very sad, all of those were part of something called living grief. And I can't tell you how comforting it was to know that, one, I was not going crazy, and that two, what I was experiencing had some names, and that I wasn't unique in what I was experiencing. I felt like our home was the only home where this was unfolding. I've learned that that's not true. I've learned that there's hundreds of thousands of homes that are dealing with what we lived with. So I learned that compassion fatigue is the name of what I was feeling when it came to being burned out and feeling like I had to find a way to refuel myself emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And that the other things I was experiencing, the sadness and the bargaining and all those bits, that was part of living grief. Because when someone passes away and we actually memorialize that person, we have a funeral, we go through these different steps of saying goodbye to someone who dies. But when a traumatized person, when a person lives with trauma, they become a different person than what they were before. And we have to recognize the loss. We have to recognize that the person we loved, the personality that we loved, is gone. And that we now live with a person that we still love very dearly, but it's a different person. So while we're getting to know the new person, we're also saying goodbye to the former person. And that's why it's called living grief, is because there's really no point in time where we put it in the past. We live with it. It's our present. It's there 24/7.
Unlike the wartime injuries that result in amputations and missing limbs, traumatic brain injury results in many invisible wounds. It's the wounds of how these individuals relate to the world, how they function in the world, how they think, how they behave, how they process information, how they problem solve. Those are all invisible wounds that can have ripple effects throughout their lives. So the ability to reunite with their families, to re-engage with the family, to go back to work, to re-enter the community. These are all areas that may be damaged in very specific ways. Memory, short-term memory, is one of the most common areas that has been damaged by these wartime injuries. It's the ability to remember, what they did within a short period of time. Another area that is often damaged by these wartime injuries is the ability to control emotions. And it's this, particularly if the frontal part of the brain has been damaged, what we call the frontal lobes. It's the ability to control emotions, to control anger, to process all the feelings that we have. So very often what you see with these wartime injuries is explosive behavior in the home, rage at the slightest provocation, threatening children or their spouses. And very often the other family members at home feel frightened for their safety with these explosive episodes. And they may be in real danger. One of the things that we always work on is advising spouses to have an escape plan, to have an emergency plan if they feel that their life or their safety of their children is in danger. Those are all typical of traumatic brain injury, which combined with PTSD literally is the perfect storm.
My experiences with Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans have taken the war back with them. In their experience, they live with it every day. They live with it every night. The hardest part is to actually get them to want treatment. It's a difficult time because it involves a lot of strife between the families. It affects the family all the way down to the children. Spouses carry a large amount of stress with them pertaining to post-traumatic stress disorder, and the veterans are basically isolate themselves periodically away from the family because of their experiences and their nightmares. There's a saying among Vietnam veterans, and I guarantee you that same saying is echoed, Afghanistan, Iraq. And that saying is this: when was the last time you were in Vietnam? Last night.
We all know that the prevalence of post-traumatic stress disorder among veterans is significantly high, and the experience of having PTSD can be terrifying. Basically, there's no safety ever. An individual who experiences PTSD is constantly on guard, constantly vigilant about their surroundings, and they're constantly in a state of internal chemical arousal, which has them on edge. For a lot of individuals, what takes the edge off could be a drink, or it could be a joint. It could be something that just calms that system so that they don't have to feel, so that they're numbed out from constantly being triggered. And never feeling like they ever left the combat zone. And for the family members, that can be very difficult to deal with as well, because they don't quite know how to approach their loved one who is experiencing this. And it's very difficult for anybody to ask for help, particularly those who have been hailed as heroes. They're celebrated and they're saluted. And we have pride for our military members. And when you're suffering in that silence, it can be a great challenge. And there is camaraderie amongst those who have served in the war, regardless of the era. And we find that they're meeting each other and joining each other in social settings, such as VFW or a local bar. And alcohol becomes a big part of their social time together. And the secondary effect of that is it calms them, it relaxes them. And many do go on to develop alcohol disorders. In addition, prescription medication is highly abused by those who have returned from the military. Oftentimes there are serious physical injuries. There are amputations. There is life-changing events, not only emotionally but also physically. And to deal with pain management, they're prescribed very powerful narcotics.
Like I said, when I first got out, or when I first got back from Afghanistan, I turned to booze. I turned to violence. I turned to my anger because it was what I knew, it was what I was familiar with, it was what I was comfortable with. To help me deal with my problems. It helped me run away from my issues. It helped me, it helped me cope with what I had to do. I was a warrior. What I knew was to fight. So I went out and I fought. But, I didn't stop to think that Jacksonville was not a war zone. I couldn't do what I was familiar with.
Being addicted to opiate painkillers is very rough, being a service member with PTSD, because it alters your mind. You're not really sure what's reality and what's a dream or what's a flashback anymore. When I overdosed, and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, had to basically stay awake to make sure I kept breathing. And she made me make a choice between her or the pills. And I made the correct choice. I flushed everything I had at the time and went cold turkey. It was a rough ride, but I had kicked the pills. Great, awesome. However, I started filling that void with alcohol and just bad behavior, just mentally abusive to everyone, directing my inward pain outward towards everyone so they could feel as bad as I felt, and I thought that was okay. And I really honestly just loved to make everyone feel as miserable as possible around me, and I was just happy-go-lucky about it. Not realizing that I'm hurting myself, hurting my relationship.
There's lots of triggers, from Iraq. Most of them I can handle without using, but there's a couple that would definitely lead me to using, which was from a nightmare. Whatever time I woke up knowing I wasn't going to go back to sleep anytime soon, I would definitely drink myself back to sleep, if I had, and I did more often than not, mix the Xanax with the drinking. And it might be 3 hours later, it might be 9 hours later, but the only way I was going to go back to sleep and not have the dream bother me for the next day or two was to drink and take pills till I passed out, whether it was on my front step, in the laundry room, on the kitchen floor with food going in the oven. When I do wake up from a nightmare, my day's shot. I don't talk to anyone. I might tell one or two people just so they leave me alone. I'm almost done with probation. Drug court probation is just a highly supervised form of probation. But at the same time, that's what got me clean. But I had to get in trouble with the law to get me to stop using drugs. And I'm in the rooms of AA and NA. But I enjoy it for the most part. It feels nice not having to get up and lie to people all day, every day.
What is very striking to me as I see veterans coming home from these more recent wars is that they do not think of themselves as having been drafted, but they think of themselves as volunteers. So the people who are serving in our recent wars are not exclusively, but largely, people who did not have easy access to education, did not have access to meaningful employment, and who were offered these things in exchange for volunteering for these wars. Wars inevitably involve enormous amounts of trauma, and soldiers see, just as do civilians in war zones, real atrocities. If you feel that you were drafted, as did people from previous wars, then the good things that happened to you in that war, the things that you feel good about yourself in, can be attributed to yourself, and the things that you need to put aside, need to have be not a piece of you, can be put on the draft. I was drafted, I was taken there. And the same is really true of the people in these wars, but they don't see themselves that way, and our society doesn't see them that way. I believe that people returning from these current wars would have an easier time adjusting if they could see themselves as really the subject of an economic draft. And that's an enormous component of the difficulty I see people having coming to terms with re-entry and creating a broader identity that takes in both their military and their new and old civilian selves.
I've been asked, what I thought of the war, and I don't give an opinion on it, whether it's right or wrong. I joined the Marine Corps, and I was fighting for my buddies there. I wasn't fighting for our government. I wasn't fighting to help Iraq. I wanted to get paid to carry guns and grenades.
When a Vietnam vet returned home, they became, not everyone of course, but statistically speaking, the ones that did become homeless, it took a little bit over 13 months for them to become homeless. The VA statistics pertaining to Iraqi and Afghanistan vets is less than 6 months they become homeless. So that's a problem.
I'm here to tell you about how veterans become homeless. And basically what happens is, as they come off active service, they are not prepared by the government to assimilate into society. Many have PTSD, which causes them to spiral down, losing their jobs, their families, their ability to maintain a home or an income. And they find themselves homeless and on the streets. That's where Operation Chill Out comes in. We are dedicated to finding them and bringing them in to temporary shelter, clothing them and feeding them, as well as finding more permanent housing for them.
Operation Chill Out is an all-volunteer outreach for homeless veterans, men and women in New Jersey. We started at the year 2000, December 21st, actually, the year 2000. A couple of friends of mine were reading a newspaper article, and it featured a homeless Vietnam-era veteran living under a trestle in Dover, New Jersey. And we said, well, let's look around and see if we can find this homeless Vietnam veteran. And lo and behold, we saw an American flag inverted upside down. It's the universal symbol in the military of distress. And what we found is a warren of rooms separated by canvas, cardboard, and corrugated tin. And out came 3 gentlemen. And we found out that these were 3 guys our age who had gone to Vietnam and had seen very, very heavy combat. After a few months and a few years, they lost jobs, they got part-time jobs, they got menial jobs, their family began to distrust them. They would have night sweats and nightmares about their situation in Vietnam, and they became homeless. Their safety net completely unraveled, and they were left to the goodness of strangers. They tell us that what happens to them in their situation is that they interact with people very cautiously because they never know when they're going to be victimized. And he says, what do you mean by that? He says, sometimes we're sleeping here and then we'll hear a noise and we have an impulse to run for safety. It would be nice if we had everything in one bag that we need to survive, just like we had in Nam. In the winter, we collect empty backpacks and we distribute them to people who promise to fill them up for us, bring them back to our locations, and we distribute them throughout New Jersey. What goes into the backpacks is everything that we gave to those 3 guys on that first encounter. Heavy socks, long johns, hooded sweatshirt, gloves, cap, and some basic toiletries like soap, hand cream, comb, brush, shampoo, toothpaste. Very, very simple. Very, very, very important to someone who's homeless. This can be their lifeline. This gives them dignity. Here we are 15 years later. Operation Chilla is now serving homeless veterans, men and women, in 14 New Jersey counties. And we have an outpost in Pennsylvania along the Delaware River where we serve in other 3 counties. During that 15 years, we've served tens of thousands of homeless people, men, women, and veterans. We've learned that 1 out of every 4 homeless persons that we meet on the street could be a veteran, and very likely is. We now see women in the mix where we previously only saw men. We never leave a wounded comrade on the battlefield, nor will we leave a homeless veteran out there.
Being in combat is one thing. You expect to see brothers die. You expect to see, your friends hurt. You expect to be killed yourself. You live every minute as if you're going to die. You accept it. And that wasn't an issue. I'd seen my brothers killed in combat. When I came home, my best friend, another Marine Corps machine gunner, one of my best friends growing up, he joined the Marines, he followed in my footsteps. He was discharged early from the Marine Corps. When he was being discharged, they gave him a full, clean mental evaluation, just said, yes, he's good. We came home, he got out about a week before me. We came home within a month. He had put a shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. He was living with me at the time, and I was there probably 15 minutes before the ambulances. I knew he was gone from the wound. I'd seen it before, and it didn't stop me trying to save him. It's one thing to see something like that in combat. It's a total another thing to see that in rural New Jersey. Your best friend, somebody that you were laughing and joking with 2 hours before that when you were working on your truck. It brings all kinds of questions to mind. What if I had had him help me stay and work on my truck? What if, I had done this different? What if I had done this? I should have seen the signs. It's my fault. In the end, we're up to 22 a day, which is absolutely appalling. It needs to stop.
So I started going to treatments, mental health treatments, doing the psychotropics through the VA. That didn't end the best, but it started me on the correct path of my healing. Through that, I found writing started to clear my mind, removing my issues, my problems, my anxiety, and making it all the paper's problem. Through my hand, through my pen, I evoked such emotion in myself that I had been missing. Because of my injury, I'll never run. But through my writing, it was so exhilarating. I felt alive again. My mind could run for my body. Now, I started writing and just writing and no real purpose to it. Till someone approached me to actually write my story to help other veterans. Through that, she helped me nurse my new talent, my new gift I had found. And through my voice, I actually started helping other veterans. Other veterans were reading what I was writing and going, wow, that's exactly what I'm feeling. But I can't put it in words like you did. Can I share this with my wife or my girlfriend or my husband? And I started to enjoy the new high I found, not off a drug, but off of helping other people. And it was so exhilarating. And it started me in my healing process. Now, PTSD or PTS or whatever you would like to call it, in my belief, there is no cure. But you have to find your new normal, your new comfort zone where you can start your own healing. Counseling is phenomenal. Some people need the psychotropics or pharmaceutical drugs. You just have to I found my avenue through writing to help me with my releases. I still have setbacks, but that's part of life. I've decompressed some of my stress. I don't feel suicidal anymore. I don't feel homicidal. I still get stressed. I still get angry. I'm only human. But now, once I start to get worked up, I realize it mentally more, and I can step back going, whoa, I need to walk away, or look at my wife or look at another family member and go, look, I need to walk away for a couple minutes. I still have my night terrors and everything like that, but now I have a release for it. I don't have to keep it all in myself and just wallow in my own hatred. I've released so much animosity or so much anger and so much hatred that I had for the people that I thought had wronged me in the past years, or the Iraqi people or the insurgents. I've, I guess, on a point, forgiven them through my writing, because why hate someone that I never knew their name, or I never saw their face, or I still carry their face with me, that I've caused injury to them. But now through my writing, I don't have to carry this stress.
You know, if I had it my way, you know, no one would ask me any questions about it. Everyone would just leave me alone. And I have my select group of people that I talk to things about this. Which one buddy from Pittsburgh, we did all 3 tours together. And of course, 1 or 2 VA people. The more you talk about it, the more it helps. And like any Marine or anybody coming back from Iraq, no one wants to admit they have a problem. No one wants to talk about it, but I've been out almost 8 years, and I've done the bulk of my talking in the past like year or 2. And as bad as it sucks, you know, it definitely helps to talk about it. The more I talk about it, the easier it gets. And like I said, you don't have to give the details, but you know, talk about it to someone, get it off your chest. Is, I guess the worst thing you do is keep it inside, which you're just going to explode eventually. And even if you just I kind of let a little bit out here and there, and that'll help keep me a little bit more sane than bottling it up, I guess, would be the best advice I have to give.
You know, being around my buddies, that helped out a lot. Guys with familiar, shared experiences. And then after Greg committed suicide, I kind of floated around for a little while, and I ended up discovering a support group for other veterans with PTSD, with issues of their own. And I fought with myself for a long time. You know, I knew that there was other veterans in there that had probably been through worse things than me, and I didn't, you know, I've always been of the opinion I didn't do anything special. I just was a machine gunner. All I did was fight for my country. You know, the guys who didn't come back, they were the heroes. I'm not a hero. And I still maintain that. But I ended up making the decision to go into the group, and it made all the difference. And little by little, I started to find out that my buddies from across the country have their own little support groups, and that peer support is actually a huge, huge beneficial thing for veterans. Because nobody understands. Unless you were there, it doesn't matter if you were in Vietnam, Korea, World War II, the Civil War, it doesn't matter. You were in combat, you were in combat. You know, it's a shared hell, and only those that have been there can understand. And, you know, I decided that I was going to start helping other veterans by helping either run the support group or volunteering my time to help other veterans. Because I never wanted to see what happened to Greg happen to another veteran, ever. And unfortunately, it happens every day, a lot. But these peer support groups, they're almost a new sweeping movement, and they actually are doing a lot of good. They're helping a lot of veterans. You know, they're helping us either get off the streets or, you know, put the bottle down or help put the gun down. You know, a lot of the suicides are, you know, self-injury inflicted, but that doesn't even account for the amount of veterans that are drinking themselves to death or self-medicating with drugs. You know, it's just as much of a suicide for a veteran from Fallujah to get plastered and then drive his truck into a tree at 90 miles an hour. He may not have meant to do it at that time, but nobody took the bottle out of his hand either. So the way it helps me cope now is I help run these veteran support groups, and they're not my idea. I would never claim that they're my idea, but I do see the good they do. And, you know, they do it for any kind of veteran. It doesn't have to just be combat veterans. You know, female veterans that were sexually assaulted, male veterans that were sexually assaulted, those happen too. Non-combat veterans, people that served in hospitals, medics. If there's trauma, they help. We're a specific culture. And I can talk to somebody who was, you know, a medic in Vietnam and feel like a brother. I can talk to somebody who was, you know, a supply clerk in World War II. It's still a sense of camaraderie. It's still a sense of something that you share, a shared experience that nobody else has ever had. And that's why we tend to stick together. That's why we go to our service organizations. That's why these support groups have started, because in the end, only we're going to look out for us. Only veterans really care about veterans, in my opinion. The public cares about us, yes, but they don't know enough to help us.